My name is Craig Picken. I'm an executive recruiter. More than a decade ago, I started my practice for one purpose: to use my experience as a former military aviator, business jet sales executive, and P&L leader to help aviation and aerospace companies and their executives be fast, adaptable, and strategic. I do these podcasts to inspire and inform, but more importantly, they are a focused platform to help business leaders grow. Welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. Going back to aircraft values, are we going to see a huge disparity between narrow body and wide body? I mean, wide bodies have always been the riskier investments to begin with. You know, the narrow bodies, everybody felt were a little bit more safe. So is the portfolio with the heavy 777, 787, A330 gonna see a bigger hit than one with just A320s and 737s?
Yeah, and I would say, look, historically that has been the thinking from folks, but I would actually argue that that's not necessarily fully in line. If you look at the difference between wide body and narrow body in general, right? Leases in general, narrow bodies have a much shorter lease duration compared to wide bodies. So wide body is 12 years, 10, 12 years is pretty normal, right? For a new one, where new narrow bodies anywhere these days, I've seen for a while, it was 6 years.
6 years and people were tearing them down. I mean, they were sending A320s, 6-7-year-old A320s to the boneyard to get torn down. And you're like, wow, what a shame.
So that to me is when you say it's a better asset. I asked, what are you looking for? I think from that aspect, yes, it's more lumpier investments, right? Because of the sheer size, dollar size, and the fact that from a transitional point of view, you're going to have to put in a lot more capital potentially to transition if it returns from one airline to another. Mm-hmm. But I think actually from a cash flow perspective, it would actually probably generate actually better cash flow dynamics than narrow bodies, because even lease rate factors, because people have been banking on this aspect, actually been higher so your gross yield has, for those who don't know, lease rate factor is monthly gross yield, right? So your gross yield annualized is actually at a much better point than on narrow bodies. So then the question is, does that take into account risk aspects? And as a finance professor, I'm all about looking at adjusted return of capital here. So when you take into all these different risks, you have your credit, you have asset risk, you have your cash flow stream risk, et cetera, a jurisdictional, et cetera. Is it still relatively better? I actually think it would be actually very dependent on the particular deal. So I actually would not make that kind of generalized kind of rationale. And the book, what will come out is, that's actually one of the hypotheses I was trying to test is, hey, is aircraft depreciation much bigger? There is definitely more volatility in the pricing of wide bodies versus narrow bodies, but I think other things will be quite surprising to folks. So I suggest that they take a look if they're interested to have a deeper kind of read in that section.
So yeah, let's come back to your book in just a second. So that you said something earlier, and this is what scares me. It's real easy for an industry to turn out the lights. You walk out, and you turn out the lights, and it's dark. But now all of a sudden you want to get the industry turned back on again. It takes a whole lot of time. Your pilots got to get retrained. It costs a lot of money to get your pilots retrained. You got to go get your pilots back to begin with. Your flight attendants the same way, your ground crews. Is that how big over, at least in Asia, how big of a fear is that a lot of these people that get made redundant don't come back, and that becomes a major inhibitor to getting an industry back to, like everybody talks about how long to 2019. I'm like, screw 2019. Let's just get back to 2012 or 2013 and call it a day. I mean, but is that a major inhibitor for
I think this will have definitely big effects. If you think about what's happening today, right? Most airlines, the first people to go are the high cost crew, right? The high cost people, naturally speaking. And who are they generally? They are generally the more expat type positions. So because they need extra lift, right? That's the whole premise. So there's been, for the last few 10 years, I would say, there's been a movement from, say, Western countries to Asian countries because they've been paying more.
Right.
In packages, and that's been growing up until last year, and now it's kind of the reverse. So yes, there will definitely be. The question is, they are, and if you think about who those people, they're recruiting. They're actually been very, very senior folks, right? That's why they can command higher kind of packages, and but those are people that are they going to be not sure if they're going to be around for another cycle, right? If you think about it from that perspective. So you really have to look at it from the point of, what about the immediate sector? What about the people who would be second officers, right? First officers who can make it to that captaincy, who might move out of the industry? What about those mechanics who might not be senior mechanics, but might move out of the industry? And what about all those cadets who are in flight training schools who just get, with all the negative publicity, not be happy to start their careers in aviation? That's, to me, kind of a much more kind of a longer impact aspect.
Yeah, that's what I worry about too. Like all the flight schools here, a lot of the flight schools in the States that were training, a lot of their students were coming over from Asia, and they're all shut down. I mean, basically everybody's got shut down. You're like, all right, well, it's, if we turn them back on tomorrow, it's a year before we start kicking out our first pilots again. So, you're shut down for at least a year. So yeah, that's the thing that bothers me the most. I figure the economics, everybody that's going to feel the pain of the economics will feel the pain, and they'll get over it and we'll move on. Money will be made by somebody at some point. But the thing that worries me the most is the pilots and the pilots and the mechanics and the highly skilled labor that doesn't necessarily come back on a whim. So let's talk about your book. So, so 20 years of residual values.
So yeah, so there's three parts of the book for people who are interested. So the first part is looking at the entire landscape of drivers as well as geographies globally in Asia and China, looking at kind of where people are and how what factors affect price. The second part, I would call it, is really looking at this 20-year study establishing aircraft as an asset class. This is the first study that I know of. I'm pretty sure that I've seen any research in. Basically, collecting a large sample from different various sources to put together this kind of compilation, right? Because if you think about what has historically been is been very individualistic, or individual companies or people putting together their thoughts on the industry, but no one has kind of done it on a collective basis. I know there's been many attempts at it, but it's been quite difficult. So that's why it's quite interesting to see kind of on a more broader scale how the industry has done. Second of all, and then the last part, is part 3, is looking at and comparing these various kind of subsections and overall to the other asset classes, the other real asset classes and stock price classes, et cetera. So you could see how well it's done comparatively, because there's always been a lot of talk about, hey, aircraft should be a low volatility and decent return, medium returns, small to medium return type asset class. But I've never seen anything systematically saying this. So this is I would say one definitive study to at least get to that point. So the question is, I hope to see, by the way, I hope to see other studies done, because this is, to me, this is just the first step into more activity in this space.
So, what's the conclusion? Is it a little bit more volatile than people tend to think? Is investing in airplanes a little bit more volatile than the general thought? Thought?
Actually, what it is the answer is actually much more nuanced than people thought, and what people take as, and I think this is the point of the study, right? Is all the kind of industry mantra supported by actual data. I think that's actually kind of the genesis of this project, right? Because there's a lot of industry mantra of, hey, this is like narrow bodies are good, wide bodies are bad, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
or
Yeah, here I
better,
am. Yeah,
like what we just,
yeah.
so et cetera. And so there's a ton of conclusions because you can see it's quite far reaching. It's a 400-page book, so close to 400-page book. So but I'll say this, look, to give the reader something. Look, I think, look, it's about economic, what you're looking at is depreciation, right? If you're looking at residual value, it's about depreciation of the capital asset. What we haven't really looked into too much on the lease rental side of things, but because there was just not too much time. But basically, what you see is that there is higher depreciation than what's, you know, what would be considered normal accounting or depreciation, and definitely some of the sub industries that parsed out. I think overall it's still relatively actually in line with kind of industry findings, but or thoughts. But this is it's quite, like I said, it's a much more nuanced answer and conclusion.
Now the book came out in early November, correct? About a
Yes,
month ago?
a few weeks ago it came, a month ago it came out, and it's available on Amazon, so people can get it on Kindle or PDFs. I think PDF, and of course the hard copy that Amazon will ship.
And so the title of it is, one more time?
Aircraft Valuation: Airplane Investments as an Asset Class.
400 pages, huh?
Yeah, let me put it this way: from start to finish, collating all the data, putting thousands and thousands of man hours putting it together. This project took about 5 years. So
I bet no, that's good. That's a great, no. Hey, look, I'm sitting there going, I'm thinking about how involved it must have been as a project. That's kind of why I was like sitting there, you know, stop for a second. I was like, wow, that's a hell of that's a heck of a difficult project. So, but you know, at the end of the day, I'll bet you that thing sits on the desk of every leasing company CEO and CIO, and they read it cover to cover, right? How's it doing? You find a lot of interest in it. You, obviously, your students are, you know, you get.
definitely, you know, from interest. Look, there's a lot of interest from different parties in the industry, right? From bankers to advisors to leasing companies, and of course also the academics, right? You know, I had the nice support of recommendations from all parties, even from airlines, right? So the ex CEO of Etihad. We had Dick Forsberg, one of the industry leaders in the valuation space, as well as academics, finance professors who have taken a look and really thought it was a worthwhile piece of research. So I hope, like you said, I hope that this really starts the discussion and gets more kind of thoughts and looks into this, and that's kind of my point.
Well, yeah, no, that's the thing, is that, you know, it starts. It's like you said, nobody had ever aggregated the info before and really thought about it as a macro platform. Everybody had their, you know, narrow bodies are good, you know, wide bodies are risky. I mean, you know, 3 conferences I was at last year, I heard, you know, narrow bodies are, you know, are easy, wide bodies not so much. So it's that's awesome. But anyway, thank you for coming on. Appreciate you walking through. We got to get through this. So what do you what's the 18-month prognostication? Is, you know, Boeing going to get through this on, you know, okay, Airbus, we can get back to normal at some point, or has this just changed the landscape totally?
Look, I think what's going to happen is end of this year to Q1, there'll be banks will have to do something, and this will basically have a lot of other kind of domino effects through the rest of the industry. But as I said earlier, the faster people take into these accounts, the faster we can get out of it, and we can get back on a growth pattern again. So that to me is the biggest aspect. So 18 months, there will be definitely some increased volatility, more vol going forward in the short term. But I think that's not a necessarily bad thing. This is a way to get people to get capital more efficiently and restructuring their capital structures, airlines, and others, so that they can be sustainable, right? That's what we want. We want a sustainable industry that grows. Right?
It's certainly for a new, it's certainly for a new class of investors coming in. They're coming in at lower prices. Cheaper assets, lower prices. It sort of resets. It starts the cycle all over again. So,
I'll make one bit. If you think about newer investors, look, this might not be a bad time to start an airline. You have cheaper, you have available labor, you can get people, you can get assets, availability of assets, and I'm sure people will give you some good deals on those. And then there's actually routes. There's route availability, there's airport availability. So it might not be a bad thought process for some of the
I was thinking the exact same thing. I was thinking there's going to be some out with the old, in with the new type of things going on here, both in the U.S. and around the globe. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Well, this is about innovation, right? As I said, once you get rid of it, there will be innovation. I have no doubt about it.
But on the flip side too, and we'll end it here. Some people are saying 36% of the business travel doesn't come back. To me, that creates new opportunities for people to figure out, okay, if the business traveler doesn't come back, what do I need to do to flex to that new reality? I personally think the business traveler does come back. Things may change for a while, but they do come back. Is the industry really going to change because you and I are now Zooming, and there's more work from home, or do you think we start to see do you start to think we really do see it back to normal in a couple of years?
I think. Look, I think temporarily it'll definitely be a big shock. I think that people are now more used to Zoom video meetings like this, so there will be a portion of people that fall away, the demand that falls away. But at the same time, I read the preliminary bits of the study, and at least from that aspect, I thought it was a bit high in the estimation, but it might not be a bad metric for the short term. But I think on a long term basis, it seems a bit high to me. So I'm more optimistic that flights will come back, and there will be opportunities for airlines to re-strategize based on this kind of new normal that we were going forward.
I'm with you. Hey, go enjoy your morning over in Shanghai. Thanks for coming on. Congratulations on the book. I know that was a huge project for you.
Thank you so much.
So congratulations on getting that done. And hey, look, let's keep the relationship going, and we'll have you back on in a couple months, and we'll see where we're at. How's that sound?
Sounds great. Awesome, great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the latest edition of the Aerospace Executive Podcast. You can reach out to me directly, Craig at NorthstarESG.com, or check us out at www.northstaresg.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, or on YouTube. Just do a search for Aerospace Executive Podcast. Thanks again. I'm Craig Piven.